Yeah.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Art Museum of West Virginia University. Welcome to those folks who are here in the gallery and those folks who are signing on online to our Zoom feed. I'm going to pause for just a moment or two to let a few people get settled in the gallery and to let our virtual folks get signed in, and then I'll get started with our introduction.
Come on in, there's still seats. Grab a chair. I'm gonna walk around that way, so there's some chairs over there. Hi, glad you could be here.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. A few technical notes before we begin. This event is being live captioned, so if you are joining us on Zoom and would like to click the closed captioning button, then you can avail yourself of that service. Also, we will have time for questions afterwards. We ask that you use the Q&A button rather than the chat button, because that's a little easier to keep track of. So if you have a question out there in Zoom land, please hit the Q&A button. Before we begin, I'd like to start with West Virginia University's land acknowledgement. WVU, with its statewide institutional presence, resides on the land that includes ancestral territories of the Shawnee, Lenape, Haudenosaunee, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, Tuscarora, Cherokee, and many other indigenous peoples. In acknowledging this, we recognize and appreciate those indigenous nations whose territories we are living on and working in. Indigenous peoples have been in the land currently known as West Virginia since time immemorial. It is important that we understand both the context that has brought our university community to reside on this land and our place within this long history. We also recognize that colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and as scholars seeking truth and understanding, we need to be mindful of our present participation in this process. All right, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Dr. Janet Snyder is Professor Emerita of Art History at West Virginia University. She is a specialist in ancient and medieval European art and architecture, and is also co-editor of Blanche Lazzell, The Life and Work of an American Modernist, which was published by WVU Press in 2004. And it is this expertise that brought her to this exhibition, Blanche Lazzell, A New Way of Thinking, where she helped us as a consultant and is giving us our talk here today. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Snyder. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and I'll come back to how we as artists and museum goers are connected to our world. But I wanted to take a cue from Roberto Lugo's talk last night and remind us all to reflect upon what the people of Ukraine are going through. Let's take a moment of silence for the people at war. The thinking that we will explore today is the process that Lazzell used and the way she put ideas together. Many of you know, and as Heather said, my primary research interest as an art historian and an architectural historian is the stone sculpture that was made in Northern Europe during the 11th and 12th centuries. You can appreciate how hard it is for me to talk about a modern artist. So please forgive my notes. So I've worked through this together. I had been working for 19 years as a designer in theater where every detail matters and the meaning can be conveyed visually before I came to art history. In art history, we always ask viewers to look and observe for yourself. Today, I ask you to look carefully and observe as we begin and end with this painting, the Provincetown Suburbs. Perhaps the most interesting things that I can say to you about this exhibit have to do with people. At the end of the 20th century, curator Bob Bridges and Christina Olson, co-director of the School of Art and Design, and I devoted at least 3 years of our lives to the book that Heather mentioned. This is about this incredible woman who dedicated her entire life to the exploration of the modern. Blanche Lazzell, The Life and Work of an American Modernist, came out from WVU Press in 2004, and they still have copies if you need yours. Okay. The more I learned about her book, and honestly, I was an editor here, I didn't write about her, but the more I learned about her work, the more I fantasized that someday I might be part of the reemergence of one of Lazzell's artworks that may have been known to exist, but which had vanished from public view. The artwork on exhibit in this gallery may initially seem difficult to understand. In the 19-teens and the 1920s, modern artists were engaged with current theoretical developments in physics and mathematics. Einstein, Max Planck, Tagaki, and Keynes. There are people in the 21st century who disdain artists and art historians, imagining what they do is separate from intellectual concepts and things that matter. But these people are mistaken. Anyone who met or heard Roberto Lugo speak last night in the Dean lecture knows this. Art historians contextualize the work of artists who are earnestly investigating critical truths. We cannot overlook how vital this investigation was and is today. In her lifetime, Blanche Lazzell was at the center of conversations. She became an important member of what a 1916 Boston Globe Sunday magazine story called the biggest art colony in the world in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Some of the Provincetown residents included the playwright Eugene O'Neill, the artists Marston Hartley, Charles Demuth, Marguerite and William Zorak, and the journalists John Reed and Mary Heaton Vorse. You may know John Reed and another socialist, Louise Bryant, from the film Reds. Though not part of that wild party set, Lazzell converted a building into a studio on a Provincetown wharf off Commercial Street, not far from the Wharf Theater, a mecca from my life in theater. Lazzell and her friends met in each other's studios to discuss modern art, to share a model or a still life setup in drawing sessions, to offer classes for aspiring artists, and to celebrate their community as modern artists. Lazzell was recognized by her peers in this community. After all, she'd traveled to Italy and Germany and had taken classes and frequented exhibitions in Paris. Hans Hofmann brought his students to her studio. When he had employed a model in his own studio, she and the other artists came to draw. And as a result, we have Hans Hofmann's remarks in his handwriting concerning his push-pull spatial theory on her drawings from some of those studio sessions. You may have seen Lazzell's Hofmann drawings if you happen to have attended an earlier exhibit of her work here in the museum, or in the exhibit 10 years ago, curated by Christina and Bob in the McGee Gallery. And this book reveals some of that. Are you forwarding these things in the Zoom? You are, so you know we're on the shell now? Do I need to tell you? Yeah, okay. Thank you, sorry. Lazzell's Provincetown Wharf had boxes of flower gardens, and the studio was covered with morning glories, and never one to waste anything. She sold flower seeds to visitors to help support herself during the Depression of the 1930s. A photo of her with her flowers was featured in another Boston Globe article. Her garden flowers provided inspiration for many of her white line prints. Here are the flowers, and here's a shell from the Provincetown beach in a 1930 painting called The Shell. And this one combines cubism and abstraction. And for you medievalists with me, we have to look and keep asking Bob if it's really, that's what's going on. So I'm hoping I can help you see what she's doing with cubism here. This exhibit helps us think about her artistic process and the way she thought. She was born in 1878 in Maysville, West Virginia, 9th of 10 children, just across the Mon River from Morgantown. She and her brother Rufus went to WVU together. She graduated in 1905, and it was on the advice of her teachers here at the university that she went to find places in the centers of art to pursue her work. She attended the Art Students League in New York and various small academies in Paris. Rufus helped her financially, enabling many of the things she wanted to do as an artist, but not everything. The Lazzell family has been supportive of our studies of Blanche Lazzell's work and our recognition of her investigations as an important link for American abstract artists with the world-changing modern art of Europe. Okay, change one. I want you to be sure, I'm going to ask you to pivot around a bit here. Be sure to look closely at this diagram, which is a diagram based on this drawing. She was exceptional in many ways. Since childhood, she'd become increasingly deaf, and she commented how fortunate she was to be hard of hearing because people wrote down what they wanted to say for her to take home. And you can see here some handwriting on this drawing. You and I are fortunate because some of the movers and shakers in modern art, artists like Hoffman, and, oops, there, that one, and Glaise, and this is Glaise's handwriting. He spoke no English, but she could read French. And so on this template, he is asking her if she's ready to paint. Do you want to paint? And that's what she's asking. So our curator, Bob, has color-coded the rectangles that are sketched out here. And if you, again, I'm asking you to look very closely, get your nose up here, and you'll see these are lines drawn with a straight edge, very carefully, extending a little over and coming back. And then Bob has figured out how to define these in red and green and, well, it's kind of blue, but it's greenish and gold. And these rotate, they show movement, and they create depth. And this is the principle that she was picking up in Paris. This an interesting woman kept impeccable records. Every sou she spent on both sojourns in Paris, every white line print she produced and where it was exhibited and sold. And she wrote long letters to her younger sister, which Bessie preserved carefully, making Blanche Lazzell the ideal candidate for study. From her own words, we know what she was thinking and what she was doing. She was a co-founder of the Provincetown printmakers. And I'm sorry, there are no prints in this show, but in the book, if anybody wants to glance at them, you can see some of her white line prints, which are a special form that she was especially skilled at presenting. That is that there are lines between the colors of a single block. It's complicated. Come to another lecture later. Anyway, in Paris in 1923, and it's interesting, yesterday I received the new Smithsonian. And the question is, was Georgia O'Keeffe known in this time period? Well, she was known in the United States, but she wasn't known in Europe at all. The first exhibits of Georgia O'Keeffe's work in Europe were in the 1990s. But in Paris in 1923, Lazzell's work was exhibited at the Salon d'Automne and at the American Women's Club, an important gathering place for expats. We find her here in Morgantown and in Provincetown, but also in New York City. And her work appeared in exhibits across America. I love it that she exhibited regularly in the Print National in Wichita, where I grew up, and as a member of artist groups like the Associated Artists of New York, she exhibited and sold artworks. As a member of the International Arts Group Society Anonyme, Lazzell was asked by Catherine Dreyer in 1928 to be on its board of directors. Later, she joined the New York Society of Women Artists and the Society of Independent Artists. In 1949, at Gallery 200 in Provincetown, and in both the large book and in this diagram, you can see she's seated on a bench, and she was recognized by the major American abstract artists. And in the background, that's Hans Hofmann standing with her. So we know that she was recognized in Provincetown as the link between what was going on in Paris and what was going on in the United States. Although, hi, come on in, hi. There's some chairs here. Although she'd been living in Paris before the First World War, Lazzell came home to Morgantown to be with her family. During the war, she joined artist friends from Paris who had moved to Cape Cod. From then, she learned the white line print technique, and hers are the most significant in the medium. The Wharf studio she lived on while in Provincetown was torn down in 2002, just before the White Line show at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Bob and Lisa Bridges, thank you very much, visited the site of her studio, collecting little fragments of wood and some sand from the shore, and gave me a tiny reliquary commemorating Blanche and her studio. And would you change to painting 10? So that way. Perhaps her most endearing characteristic for me is crankiness. Think of this, a diminutive, she was very small, nearly deaf, very independent West Virginian, traveling to the art capitals of the Western world to pursue her art. She went after what she wanted to know and used what she found compelling. She must have been a great friend to her friends, and she wrote. The complaints and urgency in her writing allow me to discover the delightful crankiness of this extraordinary woman. I was delighted to find her saying that West Virginia was not treated, in her view, on a par with other states during the 1930s. She applied through the Works Progress Administration for support for artists in the Federal Art Project. She was one of the most important fine artists to be recognized in West Virginia, and the white line prints she produced are among the outstanding examples of art from the period. Take a breath. Lazzell was 45 when she followed the suggestion of her Provincetown artist friends that she go to Paris to investigate modern art. The pale drawings along this wall that you've seen on the Zoom are sketches that she made to use as templates for painting compositions while she was living in Paris in 1923 and 1924. She studied Cubism alongside Albert Glaise, Ferdinand Leger, and André Lotte. The compositions of the paintings on this wall are derived from the concepts contained in the templates on that wall. So go ahead to a template, please. All of these artists, Glaise, Leger, and Lotte, went on to explore Cubism and modern painting in other ways. Lazzell picked up some ideas during her couple of years in Paris that she adapted and employed throughout her life. By looking at the intellectual battles of the 1920s, artists' responses to those challenges, and the work of Lazzell, we can discover what engaged her with modern art. What's interesting for me to discover are the particular forms that she preferred and used all the time. And I'll ask you to keep looking for these. I pointed out the straight lines that she used. You can find these straight lines. there are curves, and here in the other diagrams, you can see some of those curves are included. And here's divided into thirds so she can sort through what she's doing. There are bottle shapes. I mean, the painting over here looks like there's a leg, but I think it's the bottle, I think it's a bottle shape. Patterns, and they're all in the end freely drawn. And she was phenomenally skilled in drawing. What she drew, she meant to draw. And could we go to the next template, please? And I want you to get close again to look at these circles that you find in these particular templates. You'll find there's no center prick from a compass. Lazzell declared that she drew circles freehand, and here's the proof. She had what we used to call in theater perfect visual pitch. You do what you want to do. So we can begin to think, to observe how she thinks. It's not that any composition was finalized as a drawing, as a Renaissance cartoon might have been, though these two come really close. You have to do some very close studying to see the softness of that, or the cup-like character there, which is changing here, and this hard edge there. But she was always working. She didn't repeat herself at all. We can discover in Glez's notes to her and in his writing about Cubism in his book, Painting and Its Laws, that one of the features she incorporated into her manner of working was to rotate rectangles to establish depth without using Renaissance or atmospheric perspective. Can you go on to Windmills, please? You can observe, you're in my way, that there's depth in the drawings. And in this painting of Windmills, if you look, there are the sails of the mill, and then the mill is behind that. And then there's a church back here, but take a minute and step back and stop being Renaissance in your head and see these are just planes. She's established a series of planes, and then there's that great curve that goes with it here. There's no diminution of the form itself. There's just planes that we're looking at. Could you go forward to painting 10? A similar thing is going on in painting 10. Look how the rotation of the rectangles creates depth. This begins to look like the carpet on the floor if you're a naturalist, but if you're a cubist, it's a rectangle. And you can follow the lines with your eyes and see how she shifts and changes them and rotates them, following the guidelines in those early cubist templates. And also, I just love these great curves. I keep following the curves that intersect the rectangles. So the real story that I'm excited about is my own story with this painting. In September, oh, could you shift to, thank you. In 2021, I needed to pay for the professional preparation of my tax returns. And I wanted to do it in person to be sure it was taken care of. I jumped in my car to go to Cunningham Powell Alexander, but it was one of those days in Morgantown when the mile ground is completely blocked by construction, so that by the time I arrived, I was frowning and grouchy. Of course, I asked, could I use my American Express, which nobody ever takes but the grocery store? And I should have remembered that I couldn't, but I was cranky. A really gracious man chatted with me while I wrote my check, and I stomped out. By the time I'd returned home, this really gracious man had emailed a note to me saying, I understand you know something about Blanche Lazzell. My Kiwanis Club sponsors Friendship Manor, and we received a Blanche Lazzell painting perhaps 30 or 40 years ago from a former resident. We feel it's important that the painting should be well cared for. He asked, can you suggest to me who would be the best resource for us to do this? Well, my jaw dropped. I nearly died. In 20 years of dreaming about it, I never really believed that one of Blanche Lazzell's paintings would actually emerge from the shadows. To make a long story short, though the members of the Kiwanis had been caring for this painting for years, the Art Museum of West Virginia University and my co-editors of the book and I had no idea that this painting existed. I put the gracious Mr. Alexander in touch with the director of the museum, Todd Tabutis, and he arranged for a small lunch with the Kiwanis members so that Bob Bridges and I could see the painting. It arrived carefully wrapped. We chatted over box lunches, and then the moment came. I'm sure you know how we all learn with a glance how to communicate with people we know well. The museum professionals, Bob and Todd, put on their safety gloves and took the painting out of the wrapping. Bob's eyes met mine, but I couldn't tell what he was saying with his eyes. Was he saying, that's not Blanche? I mean, how could this be a painting on board? She worked on paper and canvas. We know every artwork she's made from a record book, and we don't know this one. But what Bob was saying with his eyes and a little nod of his head was, it's good, it's right, it's Lazzell. I thought I'd die. One of the Kiwanis members asked, how can it be authenticated? Since it's signed, who can we consult who would know her signature? Well, because Bob has studied all her work in public and private collections, and he's familiar with all her known work, well, the person to consult would be the curator of the museum. Bob said it aloud, that would be me. So look, when you're up here close, you'll see in the lower corner of the painting that the signature is correct. Blanche Lazzell, 1942. And you can find it over here, Blanche Lazzell, 1930. You can find the same signature. There's a label on the back from the Studio Gallery at 96th Fifth Avenue in New York that says she was asking $200 for this painting. On the back, there's also her cursive signature. Provincetown Suburbs is a painting of her world in the light and air of Cape Cod. The Kiwanis members have loaned the painting to the museum, where this 80-year-old painting can be cared for in a temperature and humidity and light controlled space. The museum found funds to have it cleaned by a professional conservator, and the color is now brilliant. In areas where it had suffered minor losses, this green down below here, the painting has been conserved. Blanche Lazzell also painted on china, designed hood rugs, and made batik on silk. Provincetown Suburbs was painted on a modern material, a composite board that had gone into production in 1929, masonite, rather than on canvas or on paper. She worked on the back of this hardboard, and again, come up close and observe that she painted in oil and she exploited the canvas-like character of this material. This is a finished painting, not a sketch. She composed the work from her own ideas and completed this painting. Could you go ahead, please? For this exhibit, Bob Bridges has framed an undated drawing in the collection of the Art Museum of West Virginia University, in which he recognized the principles of Cubism that Lazzell had learned and brought home from Paris in the 1920s. The drawing demonstrates that nearly 2 decades later, in the 1940s, Lazzell integrated some of these Cubist principles with other ideas to make the composition. See the rotating rectangles. When you get up close, you'll be able to see these. You can see a dark one right there. And then the triangles, and you can find triangles, and suddenly you realize these are a series of planes through space. There's a rectangle up here in the sky, perhaps inspired by the clouds over the ocean. Most exciting to me are the bottle form. Look right here. And the curve in the lower part of the painting. For those of us who want to read naturalism as a road or groups of bushes in the foreground. But if you look at painting 10, here's the curve. Look how the bottle, well, what I think is funny is how this is like a bottle. And this is like a bottle, so it's like a still life, but how it's here, it's flipped on its side. If you look at the composition on the tempera paintings, which are these 4 paintings on those walls, which are on loan from the Clarksburg Public Library, you'll once again find the curve, the curve, the curve, and the bottle shapes through all of these. And it then, could you shift to the shell, please? If you look at the shell, you'll find the curve once again. And here's a perfect circle up there at the top. In any case, in the compositions of all the artworks, the forms are there. The same ideas are being explored. And can we go back to this one, please? Using the same ideas, Lazzell, this extraordinary artist from Maysville, West Virginia, used her own method of working to compose a painting of plains. Her choices make use of the same ideas she'd seen in the modern painters she's so approved of. She loved the moderns, that's what she called them, when she was in Paris at the beginning of the 20th century. Again, when she was in Paris in the 1920s, when she was making her white line prints in the teens, the 30s, and the 40s. And it's the way the artist thinks that's expressed most fully in this painting. The Kiwanis Club members have been brilliant in their care for this important link in the chain. You and I, as artists and museum visitors, must offer our gratitude to such wise stewards. With careful observation, we can place it in context and recognize how seemingly unimportant and simple this landscape becomes suddenly for art historians and scholars. I hope you'll take time to use your eyes and look closely at the templates, measure with your eyes and see where she shifted gears and changed things, and at the paintings that emerged from her ways of thinking about art. Okay, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but
Thank you so much, Janet. And just as a reminder, if you're on Zoom, if you could use the Q&A rather than the chat. And if you're here live, I'll repeat your question so that it's audible for those folks on Zoom. So try and keep in mind that I'll be repeating it when you consider the length and complexity of your question. All right. Anybody have questions either here or online?
This, so you can want to look at that one and understand it. This is my friend, and he came a little bit late, so I wanted to show it.
Hi, friends. Friends are welcome.
Yeah.
So Karen would like to know if Janet has a favorite painting of Lazzell's.
In this room, I would say, well, I love the color in the Provincetown Suburbs. I think I'm most engaged with the Windmills, because it does the same thing that happens here in capturing the light and air, but it's painted in tempera or whatever the material. I thought it was gouache, but we think it's tempera anyway.
A question online. Did she look at the work of Juan Gris?
You know, she mentioned some people when she was talking about the moderns, and she talked about clay. She liked clay a lot. Well, she spelled it K-L-E-E, right? Or was it K-L-E-Y? That was it, K-L-E-Y. And we can't find out who these people were. And she went to all those exhibits, but she didn't list who was doing what. I found that frustrating about her. But Juan Gris, I don't know, maybe, who knows? She did, okay.
Bob is saying that she did.
Bob is saying he's looked at all this stuff, so, yeah. Okay.
And there was another question. Can you talk more about the colors that she uses typically?
I might ask Bob to talk about the color. She actually had a palette, and I think it's over here, that she used all the time. She said The color scheme I tried to keep very simple. In this example, I used vermilion, yellow, and blue-green, and I do very little mixing of colors. It's too hard to make the planes stay back in their places. I try to make these planes balance as well as possible. That gives the harmony of line or rhythm that is the motif for decoration. So one thing you guys have chosen this color because it's one of her colors, these for the walls. And it is a pretty limited palette. So.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
When would she have been at the Art Students?
And so the question was, when was she at the Art Students League?
Just about 1906, 1907.
Okay,
In
and
classes with George O'Keeffe, Miss O'Keeffe, she referred to her as. Yes.
so 1907, she was in classes with Georgia O'Keeffe.
They shouldn't. The one thing I didn't mention, and I ought to, was that, she was pretty conservative. She was from this little family in this little town, and that she wanted to go after what she wanted. But when she went to Paris, she dyed her hair bright red, in the 20s. And she didn't get a lot of approval for that, but nonetheless, she was a crazy lady. I mean, she's in her 40s. Anybody else? Okay. Well, do take time and look, because that's what's useful about this exhibit. We have the largest collection of materials by Blanche Lazzell here at the university, and we keep bringing them out in little bits so that you can experience her work. And so come back again when there's another one in the fall. Will there be another one in the fall? Yeah, another one in the fall.
And there are some words of appreciation in the chat as well. Thank you for your enthusiasm and for such an exciting opportunity to reveal this new piece, this
Yay.
amazing rediscovered painting. So a lot of folks appreciating both the piece itself and your work in helping to make us understand it a little better, Dr. Snyder. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you to everyone. We, of course, would like to invite you to our forthcoming lectures and events here at the Art Museum in the semester. On Thursday, March 24th, we're going to have an all virtual event, Making Art, Collecting Art, a conversation with James Cottrell, Joseph Lovett, and Deborah Cass. So this is, of course, based on our exhibition Upstairs, True Colors Picturing Identity, which I would also invite and encourage any of you who haven't had a chance to see it to head on up there this afternoon and see. But Dr. Cottrell and Mr. Lovett are the collectors who loaned us some of the works of art in the exhibition. And then, of course, Deborah Cass's work is on display in the exhibition. And then Friday, April 1st. So again, on the first Friday, we'll have our next installment of Lunchtime Looks with Brad Grimes from the LGBTQ Center. And he will be focusing on the exhibition Upstairs as well. So we've had some really lovely perspectives with Professor Light and Dr. Snyder on our exhibitions in our permanent collection. And then Mr. Grimes will offer us a new look upstairs as well. So we hope to see you then. Everyone stay safe and well. Thank you to everyone here and out there in the Zoom world. And thank you to Dr. Snyder.
I can't breathe in this. Okay. It's okay. Okay. I can't breathe in this thing.